Let me tell you how this is going to work. All of your 22 chilies will be all individually signed a number. This is to remain anonymous. Please do not make your chili known. Then you will use your phone on the TV screen behind me to scan the QR code and vote for which chili you think is the best. So please remain anonymous. Don't make your chili known, and go for it.
Have you tried number one yet?
Nope.
It's number one for a reason.
Oh, okay.
I cannot recommend it enough. I'd stay away from number two. Yeah, you don't want to fill up on all this stuff before you get down to number one. That'd be worst move of the night. People start to fill up on this stuff towards the end. And I just want to make sure that you leave enough room for number one. Okay? Because that would make me, stay out of this there. I just have a strong feeling that number one is the number one. Just to make sure, we have an understanding, okay? Is that gonna work? All right, there we go. Don't forget, number one is number one, okay? Well, I'm gonna give you the inside scoop here, Jose. Just make sure you leave room for number one down there.
All right.
Just remember, number one is number one for a reason.
And the winner of this year's chili cook-off is Nikki Canary.
That gums. Shucks, man. Why did you?
Hey, wait a second. All right. I don't know why my mom's words are in my head right now. She used to pray that my sins would find me out quickly. So I can't get away with anything with Ben Meckus around here. This is crazy. And speaking of my mom, she likes to tune in every once in a while. Happy birthday, Mom. It's my mom's birthday today. Yep. She tunes in from Louisiana every once in a while. And I still can't believe they have internet down there in Louisiana. So it blows my mind. But good to see you. I'm Pastor Craig. If I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, I would love that. And I do want to say, for those that are joining online, we've got a really robust online community of a lot of people who can't physically come to Tab. And just the past weeks, I know there's been a lot of prayer requests and a lot of needs that have come through. So I just want to say we are praying for you this week. Those that are online, you're not forgotten. We do appreciate you tuning in every week, and just wanted to say that. For those of you that are here, it's good to see you. I'm Pastor Craig. If I haven't had a chance to meet you, I'd love that opportunity. We're continuing on in a sermon series. We're calling it Sound Bite. And we've been looking at some of the kind of familiar verses that perhaps end up on a coffee mug or on a rug or, on the plaque on the wall. And we've got several of those in our house as well, too. Not knocking them. It's just sometimes it's good to come back and look at the full context of these verses that we become so familiar with, just to make sure that we're remembering the context of the verses, right? Because we can kind of chop things off, and in our mind, it's like, we kind of go down a path that not all bad, but just good to come back to the scripture and observe the context. And so today, we're going to continue down that similar path. We're going to be looking at 1 Corinthians 13:10 is where we're going to be today. And this one is kind of an interesting verse because even the verse itself, it doesn't really say this, but you've probably heard this before because the verse just kind of gets taken out of its context, and even the exact words, we kind of boil it down into a saying, and maybe you've heard it before, but the old adage that God won't give you more than you can bear. Has anybody ever heard that before? God won't give you more than you're able to handle might be another way to say it. And the verse doesn't actually say that. And so I want us to kind of set I want to set it straight today as we look at this kind of popular phrase. And I want to just be straight up from the very beginning. I know this probably isn't going to be a surprise to you, but God does allow things in our life. He does allow circumstances in our life that are absolutely more than we can bear. He does. You might think, well, how? Why would God do that? Well, first, let's just take a step back and let's think about the character of God first and foremost, just as we begin. Like if we go down that path where we say, God will bring us to the brink, of something in our life, but he won't let us go over that line of something that we absolutely can't bear. We kind of can come up with this image in our mind of like God in heaven, and he's got his hand on the thermostat of our life, and it's like things are kind of going down, or things are becoming difficult, and he's sitting there and he's watching it, and right before we get to the breaking point, he throttles back. And it's like, that doesn't really align with the character of God. He doesn't take delight or joy in the difficult circumstances of our life. What this verse is talking about in the context of it, it's talking about a very specific thing. It's talking about the temptations that we face. So I want us again to go back and unpack this, because there's actually a really beautiful promise that God does give us in 1 Corinthians 13:10. I hope it's not 10:13. Is it 10:13? I got my numbers are crossed up today. And I knew that as soon as I said that. Oh well. All right. God will absolutely allow more than we can handle, right? If you've babysat a 2-year-old, if you've ever had a 2-year-old, we know this, okay? But let's go and let's look at the context of this, and we'll unpack it. So Corinthians 10:11 through 13, let's start there, and then we'll dive into it. All right. These things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our instruction, on whom the ends of the ages have come. So whoever thinks he stands must be careful not to fall. No temptation has come upon you except what is common to humanity. But God is faithful. He will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. But with the temptation, he will also provide a way out, so that you may be able to bear it. 1 Corinthians 10:11 through 13. All right, so this passage that Paul is writing in 1 Corinthians, okay, it's not a blanket promise that we will never endure things in life, or we will never be in a situation that we can't handle. And again, that's not an unmerciful thing from God. It's just the realities of this world that we face. It can be a tough world, right? It can be a difficult circumstances of life. And it's actually better that we don't draw that line, that God won't give us more than we can handle. Because what does Paul say time and time again? It's in our weakness that Christ is magnified, right? It's in weakness that we experience the strength and the power of God. So we absolutely do find ourselves in these places where we find ourselves in a situation where it's like, I don't know what the path forward is. I can't handle this. Or maybe I'm just the only one. Have you ever been there before in your life? It's like, God, I don't know what the path forward is in this situation. I can't handle this. And I love going back and looking at some of the pastors over Tab's history and in the consortium. And there was a phrase that I'll attribute it to Dick Woodward, if that name sounds familiar, right? But I loved a saying that he used to say oftentimes, God, I can't, but you can. God, I can't, but you can. And when we boil it down, like this is the essence of what our faith consists of. Right? If we could handle the situations of life, right? If God never allowed us to get into situations where we felt like we were in over our head, if those situations never happened in our life, I can speak from personal experience that, man, I don't like going through those situations. I don't like when those things happen in my life, but those are the absolute times that my faith is formed. Because I'm reminded in those moments, God, I can't do this. I can't handle this. but I fully believe that you can. God will absolutely give us more than we can handle. But when it comes to the temptations in our life, when it comes to those times in our life when we're facing temptations to sin, that's what Paul is talking about here. This is the beautiful promise. You know, we're not at the mercy of sin. We're not at the mercy of sin. We're at the mercy of a gracious and a good God who will provide a way out. That is the context of this verse. I love a book, and I think I've referenced this before, but there's a book that I read several years ago. It's called The Road. It's just a regular kind of novel, but it's about a story of a father and a son, and life has taken everything away from them. They just have each other, and they're journeying through the world. They're trying to find, a new life for themselves. And the book at the end, it does end on this hopeful note. But I mean, they're just traveling through despair after despair after despair. And there's a quote that has stuck with me for all these years. The son looks at the father and he questions his dad. He said, "Dad, you're a brave guy." Like, he sees this courage and his dad doing all these brave things, and he sits and he asks his dad, he says, "Dad, hey, what's the most brave thing you've ever done?" And the father looks at him and he says, "Getting up this morning." Getting up this morning. And sometimes we find ourselves in that spot in life, right? We find ourselves in that spot where it's like, we don't know what the day holds. We don't know what next week holds. We just keep getting up. We just keep showing up. The Apostle Paul has been in this situation before too. In 2 Corinthians 12, 9 through 10, he says, "But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness. Therefore, I will most gladly boast all the more about my weakness, so that Christ's power may reside in me. So I take pleasure in weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and in difficulties for the sake of Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong." And again, I just want to reiterate, right? The promise is so much better. The promise of 1 Corinthians is so much better than this blanket promise that God will never allow us to go through anything that we can't handle. Because the power of God is manifest in our weakness. It's in our surrender that we find our strength. The church of Corinth, they know what it was like to live in a world that was ripe for temptation. They knew what it was like to live in a world that all around them, they were surrounded in a culture that was going the opposite way from a godly lifestyle. And we find ourselves, right, in a culture in many ways. We live in this postmodern world, and it's just difficult. Like, it feels like we swim upstream many times. Feels like that the world around us, right, is just a continually difficult place to live in. And when we look back and we look at these letters, perhaps, of the Apostle Paul, it's like, well, Hello? Oh, all right. I kind of like having the mic here anyway. All right, cool. We'll see how this goes. The church in Corinth, right? They lived in a very similar world. They knew what it was like to have temptations that were all around. There's a quote that I looked up just to give us an idea, and I mean, it's kind of a little bit vulgar, but just hang in there with me because it helps us to see what the world of 1 Corinthians was like.
And it says this, and the temple of Aphrodite, which was so rich that it owned more than 1,000 temple slaves, prostitutes whom both men and women had dedicated to the goddess. And there it was also on account of these women that the city was crowded with people and grew rich. For instance, the ship captains freely squandered their money, and hence the proverb, not for every man is the voyage to Corinth. Corinth was a rough place, right? They knew what it was like to live in this world where temptations abounded. And this is the world that Paul is writing this letter to. And he's reminding them that God will be faithful. God will provide a way out. God doesn't want us to be at the mercy of sin in our life. We're not at the mercy of sin. We're not at the mercy of Satan's power in our life. God is faithful to provide a way out. So what is Paul saying? He begins and he says, like, don't forget the examples of the past. And if you go back and you look at 1 Corinthians 10 and you look at the verses that are before this, Paul gives an example to these Corinthians of what happened to the Israelites in the Old Testament. And he reminds them that God did all these amazing works in the life of Israel. He saved them from the sea. He saved them through the desert. He brought them out of Egypt. They had all these amazing privileges as the children of God. And yet they still failed in many ways. They still failed to honor God in an appropriate way. And so Paul is reminding the 1 Corinthian church, as the children of God, you got tremendous privileges, right? We have tremendous privileges as the children of God. But those privileges don't negate the responsibility that God has called us to as well. We can't allow our privileges as the people of God. That's all right, I can just hold this. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you, Ben. Thank you. You're always super helpful, though. I appreciate it. We can't allow our response, our
Apparently your message must be real good because you're getting attacked, apparently. Before that one goes out, let me just get your old one.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I need to regroup, man. The bus trip kind of did me in a little bit. I know Carol Lee had to do you in, and then we had a wedding yesterday, and I'm just like, I'm all over the board today. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, don't mind me.
Okay. Everything good back there?
Mostly. Your headset should work.
All right, thank you.
I don't want to put this back in your pocket.
It's okay. Thank you. Thank you. All right. You know what happens when you get kind of a little bit confused on where you are? I'm just going to go back and I'm going to read the verse, and then we're just going to dive into this verse today. Let's just keep it simple. How about that? All right, here we go. 1 Corinthians 10, 11 through 13. These things happened to them as an example. All right, so Paul, again, he's going back. He's reminding the church in Corinth. They're in a situation where they're wondering, how do we continue to live this life of integrity in this world? It seems like it's impossible. Everywhere you turn, there's opportunities for sin. Everywhere you turn, there's these temptations that we face. Like, I can imagine the Corinthian church was feeling the pressure, right? I mean, it's easy for us to think, well, we're unique in our situation. The world is so much harder for us to live out our faith in this world that we live in, and it is challenging.
It's difficult to live a life of faith in the world that we live in. But when you go back and you look at the New Testament world, it's been this way from the beginning. So there's a connection that we have with believers of all the centuries that have come before us that we can take heart in how they've navigated, and they haven't done it perfectly. And we won't navigate it perfectly either, right? Like we have those times in our life where we fail. We have those times in our life where we don't take the out that God gives us because we convince ourselves in this particular moment. Yeah, I know this is not the right thing for me to do. I know that this person isn't the right person for me to date, or I know this isn't the right job for me to take, or I know this isn't the best friendship circle that I can put myself into, or I know I don't need to compromise in this particular area, but I think just this one time I can get away with cheating in Candyland. There, I confessed my sin. Right? And bingo, I did cheat in bingo. No, I didn't cheat in bingo on the bus trip. Yeah. I just didn't win because I told them on the bus, God just doesn't give me favor when it comes to games of chance. I don't know. Oh, that was a joke. That was funny. It was Christian bingo, okay? All right. Am I good? Yep.
So all that to say, right? We can easily think that this particular situation or this particular time we're going to get a free pass, and we've found ourselves in those positions before. And if you're like me, right, when you find yourself down a path that you never intended to be in, it always ends up costing more. It always ends up causing more pain. So that's what I just want us to kind of have a frame of reference, right? Like, life is difficult and life is hard in general, but living a godly and a righteous life is difficult and hard as well. There's so many things in our world that are constantly pulling at the affections of our heart. And this verse is a reminder for us. And Paul does the same thing that I want to do for us. Paul is going back. He's telling this church in Corinth, what you're experiencing in this vile place like Corinth. I just read that quote because Corinth was a difficult place to live out your faith. It was a port city. It was a place where worlds intersected together. It might be like a modern day New York City, or it might be like a modern day Tokyo, or I think we got some folks from maybe Lagos here, Nigeria, right? These port cities where different parts of the world and cultures come together. And Corinth was a city like that. Anything you wanted, it was there. And this church, this mainly Gentile, non-Jewish church, was trying to figure out how do we honor God? How do we stay true to what God has called us to do when all it takes is us stepping outside of the church and stepping onto the streets and all this temptation is there? And this is a promise that we must cling to today. We have to cling to this promise because we will find ourselves in that place where, man, this looks really good. This looks like a step that I need to take. Like, I think I can get away with it one time. Or, right, we just find ourselves in the pressures of life where the easiest thing to do is to go after whatever the tangible solution is in the moment. Well, I just need to grasp something that I feel like is in my control. I just need a little bit of control in this moment, God. And we go after these things. And Paul is reminding the church in Corinth, who lived in a very, very difficult place, a difficult place to honor God. And he's reminding them that God will not put us in a place to fail when it comes to the sin and the temptations in our life. He always is faithful to provide a way out. Literally, the literal words, he always provides a way of escape. Isn't that amazing to think about today? And I know talking about sin is not easy. I think Satan obviously hates it when we talk about sin. I think, it is funny on days when all the tech kind of stuff starts to go haywire, but it is an important conversation. And I'm not talking to us today in a condoning kind of a way. That's not my heart. But I know from experience that when we go down a path that is not God honoring, it always costs us more. God is not a killjoy in our life. God loves us. He loves us. He's for us. This is the heart of this Corinthian passage. He doesn't want us to go down a road that he knows is going to lead to our destruction, because sin always costs. And we don't like to talk about it, but we should be reminded of this. It's God that has good intentions for our life. It's God that wants to lead you down a path of freedom. It's God that wants to provide the abundant life that only he can provide. Right? This is God's heart for us. But yet we live in this world where everything pretty much, I don't say that lightly, but so much is trying to pull our hearts in the opposite direction. And man, it's so subtle. It can be so subtle. And we just wake up and we find ourselves in a place we never intended to go, just because we've taken little steps of compromise, right? And so Paul is charging this church. He's telling them, look, I know you guys live in a difficult spot. And he goes back and he gives examples, right? You know what happened to the children of Israel? By and large, only 2 of them made it into the promised land. Their sin took them in a path that was never intended for them to go. God still loved them. They were still God's covenant people. It's not that. But they missed out on the blessing that God had for them because they couldn't see past their immediate circumstances. And so Paul is using this. He's going back and he's reminding them. And this was a Gentile, non-Jewish church in Corinth. So maybe he was telling them these stories for the first time because he wanted to see them succeed. He wanted to see them live a God-honoring life, and he didn't want them to be duped into believing that they didn't have any other options, because God always provides a way out, a way of escape. That phrase there, a way out, was literally back, if you look at the original language of it, the word picture that it depicts is a mountain pass. A mountain pass. It's the image of being in a valley, right? And many times they would use it in a military setting. An army would be trapped down in a valley, seemingly no way out. And then there would be a mountain pass, this small mountain pass, a way of escape. And if an army is trapped in a valley and you see a way of escape, you're not sitting there taking time to pack up your bags nice and neat. You're not taking time to shake hands with the enemy. You're getting out. You're taking it. And Paul is just reiterating that in this passage. God will provide a way of escape. We're not at the mercy of sin. That when it comes to temptation, God will not give us more than we can handle. And I like how he reminds us there too, whatever we're facing, no temptation has come upon you except what is common to humanity. One of the great blessings for us to be reminded of is that for all the power that Satan does have, he's not creative. He's really not crafty in that sense of the word. He's just got a couple of things that he can utilize. He's only got a couple of tools at his disposal. And he can lie to us. He can accuse us, right? He can distort things. But what we're facing isn't anything that is uncommon to what humanity has faced. So we know his games. That's what Paul's reminding us of. We know his games. But yet, we can, again, easily think, well, just this one time, I think I could be an exception to the rule. And Paul is reminding us not to play that game. We're not at the mercy. We're not at the mercy of sin. God has provided a way of escape. Take the way of escape. And we'll be blessed as a result of that. So when we think about this passage today, right? I don't know what you're facing today, and I want to leave it on a hopeful note because again, like life is difficult and hard. We're coming to the end of a really tiring season, you know. By the time May rolls around, maybe you're at the end of a season, right? Either a sports season, or maybe your kids are getting ready to end the school year, or we've got those that have graduated and they're getting ready to head on into a next chapter of their life. But when you're in those seasons, when you're exhausted and you're tired, those are the times that we can be susceptible, right? Those are also the times that we just face a lot of temptation in our life. If Satan can't get us, you know, if he can't confuse us or trick us, he just wears us down sometimes. And I just wanted to be reminded today as I thought about this passage, because it can become so overwhelming sometimes, to be reminded of the fact that God is faithful to provide a way of escape from the temptations that we face in this life. We're not at the mercy of sin. We're at the mercy of a good and a gracious God who has a plan for our life and wants to see us thrive in our relationships, in the opportunities that we have, in the experiences that we have. It's Satan that wants to kill, steal, and destroy. So as we're reminded of that today, I don't know if you're in a season where, man, maybe you feel like, man, I feel like I am being tempted to go down a path that I know I don't need to go down. Take heed of this verse. Be reminded that there's a way of escape. But we flee from sin. We don't play with it. We don't see how close we can get to it. Because again, maybe it's because my mom's birthday. My mom and dad always say, you play with fire, you're going to get burned. And I don't want us to lose sight, because when we, when you talk about sin in today's world, it's like, let's don't really talk about sin. Like, that's a bummer. Let's don't talk about sin. Like, sin is kind of a lame thing to talk about. We talk about sin because when we compare what God intends for our life and we compare the goodness of God in our life, and we're reminded that sin creates a wedge between us and our relationship with God, it's not that God is trying to suck joy out of our life. God is the giver of joy in our life. It's sin that sucks the joy out of our life. And I say it to you humbly today. I'm not perfect. Man, trust me, I make mistakes. But when I go down that path and I think, well, just this one time. Yeah, just this one time. I know this is going to work out this one time. It never does. It always ends up costing more than we want to pay. Because it's God that intends good for our life. As we step out in faith, right? We think about faith sometimes, I think, in the big things of life, or we think about it in kind of the good ways, as we should. Faith is always good. But you know, there is a level or a degree of faith that this boils down to. When we have two options on the table, and we know one is the path of wisdom, we know one is the path of godliness, we know one is the way that's going to honor God in our life, and the other one is not bending our lives to the book. The other option is to try to satisfy or to solve the situation on our own terms. Really, what it boils down to is faith. Do we have the faith to believe that God has good for our life? Even if it's a hard thing for us to do in the moment. Even if the path of integrity in this moment is going against everything that my heart wants in this moment. And just because our heart longs for something, right? Jeremiah says that the human heart is wicked above anything else. We have this bent in us. We have these cravings in us that are always warring and battling, and we want to solve things or satisfy things on our own terms. But yet we have this passage and many others that are calling us to a life of integrity, calling us to a life of character, calling us to a life of obedience to God. Obedience to God. Not because God is trying to get things out of us, not because he needs our performance, but because he wants our heart. And as we walk down that path of obedience, maybe that's not the easiest path in the moment, but you take that step of obedience, and with every passing step, you start to see the path before you widening into that path of freedom that God has for us. And that's been my experience 100% of the time. Again, I don't always get it right. But those times that I step out in faith and I honor God, it always, and I can say it always, works out to where I see the hand of God in that moment, even if it was the hard step to take. Those times that I haven't, those times that I've failed, those times that I've gone the other direction, doesn't take long when oh Lord, have mercy on me. I'm so sorry. I took a step away. You know what's even good in those moments? We serve a God that abounds in grace. We don't take his grace lightly. But maybe you're there today, as we've all been. Maybe you're in a spot where it's like, yeah, I took a step I really wish I wouldn't have taken. And now I find myself in a place where I'm feeling the consequences of my sin. You know that God's grace is so good, he will meet you in that place as well too. He will meet you in that place where you feel weak and you experience his strength. One of the ways our God makes his strength known is through the redemption of sinful humanity. He has redeemed us out of whatever situations we might find ourselves in. And I was reminded on this amazing bus trip that we went on from Dr. Hap Struthers. We have a Jim in our midst, and I didn't tell him I was going to say this, but he shared with us on the bus trip really what the heart of salvation is. And a lot of times when we think about that word salvation, right, and this Paul is reminding us, like, There's an escape. Like, God is faithful. He's provided this escape. He's provided this way of salvation. We need to take the way of salvation. And oftentimes we focus on what God is saving us from, but we need to be reminded of what God is saving us to. And He's pulling us to His heart. He's pulling us and teaching us through our steps of obedience, that He's calling us to His heart, and it's a place where we discover abundance, we discover joy, we discover fulfillment in a way that nothing this world can provide. To our youth and to our students, right? I know many of you are graduating and you're going to be taking the next step into whatever God has for you. And I don't know what all life has in store, but I'm sure there are going to be many decisions that you're going to be making over the days and the years to come. And I just want to remind you that God is for you. He has a plan and a purpose for your life. And there is nothing this world can offer that can compete, that can hold a candle to a life. Don't have to be the grandest person in the world, right? Just taking steps of obedience and honor to what God has called you to do. That's it at the end of the day. Waking up and saying, God, more than anything, I want to honor you with my life today. I want to live a life of purpose and meaning and worship back to you today. That's my heart's cry for this day. You will experience a life, not an easy life, but you will experience a life of joy and fulfillment and satisfaction that nothing in this world can ever, ever, ever provide. Nothing in this world can provide a life that God has intended for you. So as we look at this topic of temptation, right? And it took me a while to get there. I just had a slow start today. I don't know. Thanks for your grace on me today. But as we've remembered this beautiful truth, it's not that God won't give us more than we can bear, because life does have a way of giving us more than we can bear, but God steps into those moments and we become less, we decrease so He can increase. And it's in those very moments when we're in over our head that we actually experience the strength of God in our life. So I can't promise you that you're not gonna ever face a situation that you cannot bear, because we all come to those moments in our life. But when it comes to the temptations that we face, Satan's games, craftiness, all the things, God's word does remind us that there is always a path of escape. We're not at the mercy of that temptation. Now, we have to be pretty aggressive with it sometimes. You know, Jesus said, if your eye causes you to sin, it's better for you to pluck your eye out and go to heaven with one eye than it is to allow that sin to continue to manifest and take root. And I used to think, like, well, that's a wild thing to say. Like, Jesus, what are you telling us to do? He's just saying we have to be responsible too. We've got to take initiative, right? Don't get cutesy with sin. But there is always a path of escape. And that brings my heart a lot of joy. Because so many times we convince ourselves, like, I feel trapped here. I feel like I don't know how to overcome this. Don't forget that it's in our weakness that Jesus manifests His strength. And it's actually in our surrender that we find our strength, in our surrender to what Jesus has called us to do. And He does provide a plan of escape. Father, we come before you today, and Lord, I pray that you would take my words. You know, I'm tired today, and even in my weakness today, Lord, I pray that your strength was made known. I pray that you take the words. And I just pray, Lord, that you continue to change our hearts, change my heart, Lord, as I think about this as well, too. And Lord, I thank you that you do promise in your word that there is no temptation, Father, that we face that you do not provide a way out for. So we just want to thank you for that today. And Lord, as we enter into this time today, maybe there's somebody here that wants to have a conversation, or they want to have somebody to pray with and help process through. I pray that as we sing today, Lord, I pray that people would be bold, even after the service, if they just want to come forward and just to have prayer or somebody to talk to, Lord. I pray that you would do your work in people's hearts the only way that you can. And Lord, we love you. We thank you. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.